You probably won't believe me, but I need to tell someone before it happens again. It's been years now, but the silence, that particular kind of dead quiet, still claws at the back of my throat whenever the sun begins to dip below the horizon. It started in a town called Oakhaven, a place I only found because my old Civic finally decided to give up the ghost on a forgotten stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere. Before we begin, I want to thank you for being here. I know many of you use these scary stories to relax and fall asleep, and I'm doing my best to grow this little channel. Please subscribe, turn on the bell, and share your feedback. It helps me a lot. Let me know in the comments things like, are the stories too long or too short? Do you want more sound effects? Is the narration calming enough? Your words keep me going. Now, let's dive in. I was on my way to visit my sister, a cross-country slog that was already testing my patience. The engine coughed, sputtered like a dying man, and then surrendered with a mournful sigh, leaving me stranded on a cracked asphalt road that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint since the Eisenhower administration. Just as the last vestiges of cell signal vanished, a sign appeared. Oakhaven, 2 miles. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered to life. The town itself was like something out of a postcard from a bygone era. Quaint isn't a strong enough word. Victorian houses, painted in muted pastels, lined streets that were preternaturally clean. There were manicured hedges, flower boxes bursting with riotous blooms, and not a single speck of litter. It was almost too perfect, like a film set or a meticulously maintained museum exhibit. I rolled my sputtering car down the main street, past a general store with a faded Coca-Cola sign and an antique shop that looked perpetually closed, until I spotted a small sign, the old Willow Inn, vacancy. An elderly woman, Martha, greeted me at the inn's reception. Her face was a network of gentle wrinkles, her eyes a startlingly clear blue. She moved with a quiet grace, her hands clasped at her waist. "Oh, dear," she said, her voice soft like rustling leaves. "Car trouble, I presume? Happens often enough on that old stretch of road." "Don't you fret. Young Owen at the garage will have a look for you in the morning." She handed me a heavy brass key, the cool metal a stark contrast to the stifling warmth of the early evening. I explained my predicament, paid for a night, and then, as she turned to retrieve a ledger, she paused. Her clear eyes met mine, and a faint, almost imperceptible shift occurred in her expression. The gentle warmth seemed to cool, replaced by a subtle, unreadable stillness. "Just one thing, dear," she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Here in Oakhaven, we believe in a good night's rest. So after sunset, everyone stays indoors. It's an old tradition, you see. Keeps the quiet." She smiled then, a small, polite curve of the lips, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. The air around her suddenly felt heavy, charged with an unspoken weight. It struck me as odd, but I dismissed it as small-town eccentricity. Every place has its quirks, right? The next day, Owen, a lanky young man with grease under his fingernails and a perpetual squint, confirmed my worst fears. The alternator was shot. He'd have to order the part, which meant I was stuck in Oakhaven for at least another day, maybe 2. I spent the daylight hours exploring. The library was a dusty haven of forgotten books. The small park boasted an ancient willow tree, its branches drooping like a weeping giant. I saw a few other townsfolk, mostly older people, moving about their day with a slow, deliberate cadence. They were unfailingly polite, offering soft hellos and brief, knowing smiles. But there was a strange undercurrent to their normalcy, a quiet intensity in their eyes, as if they were holding a collective breath. And I noticed something else. No children. Not a single one. As dusk began to settle, a peculiar shift occurred. The gentle hum of afternoon life died down with unnatural speed. Shops that had appeared open moments earlier now had their blinds drawn, their doors firmly shut. The streetlights flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows, but they seemed to illuminate an absence rather than a presence. By the time the last sliver of sun vanished behind the distant tree line, the town was utterly, completely silent. It was a silence so profound it felt like a physical pressure, a vacuum that sucked the air from my lungs. I was back in my room at the old Willow Inn, the heavy curtains drawn, and for a moment I felt a peculiar sense of safety, a fleeting comfort in the thick, ancient walls that buffered me from the outside. But the silence wasn't quite perfect. Beneath it, just barely perceptible, was a faint, rhythmic thrum, like the steady beat of a distant, colossal heart. Curiosity, that insidious traitor, began to gnaw at me. What was so important about staying indoors? What tradition was so vital it imposed such an absolute curfew? The thought of being confined, of missing out on some mysterious town secret, was unbearable. I waited, heart thumping against my ribs, until the digital clock on the bedside table read 2:17 a.m. Slowly, carefully, I slipped out of my room. The inn's hallway was a tunnel of oppressive darkness, punctuated only by slivers of moonlight filtering through an upstairs window. The old floorboards groaned under my bare feet, each creak amplified in the stillness. The air grew colder as I descended the stairs, carrying with it a faint, earthy smell, like damp soil and something else, something metallic, almost ozone-like. The front door was unlocked, as if daring me. I stepped out into the night, and the silent pressure intensified, wrapping around me like a cold, damp shroud. The streetlights cast their pale glow, illuminating nothing but empty cobblestones. The trees stood like skeletal sentinels. The silence was absolute, save for the distant, persistent thrum, which seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath my feet. I walked slowly, eyes darting, muscles tense. Every shadow seemed to writhe, every breath felt too loud. Then I saw them. They weren't moving, not a single one. Scattered across the main street, on the lawns of the Victorian houses, even in the small park, stood the townspeople of Oakhaven. Martha was there, near the general store, her hands still clasped at her waist. Owen was by the garage, his head tilted back. There were dozens of them, old and young, men and women, all standing perfectly still. Their eyes were rolled back in their heads, the whites gleaming eerily in the moonlight, like polished marbles. Some had their mouths agape, others were barely parted, but from each and every one came the sound. It was a whisper, not individual words, not a chorus, but a collective, sibilant hiss, like 1,000 dry leaves skittering across pavement, or a continuous exhalation of sand. It was low, rhythmic, and utterly chilling. It seemed to pulse, to wax and wane with the mysterious thrumming I had heard earlier. Their faces, devoid of expression, were all angled slightly upwards, their sightless eyes fixed on something above them. I followed their gaze, my breath catching in my throat. There was nothing there, just the night sky, a few faint stars. But as I stared, a subtle distortion began to manifest in the air directly above them. The starlight seemed to bend, to warp, as if passing through an unseen lens. A deeper darkness, not an absence of light, but a presence of it, seemed to coalesce, shiveringly indistinct, yet undeniably there. It felt vast, ancient, and utterly, profoundly wrong. The whispers intensified, becoming more fervent, more desperate, a collective pleading directed at the unseen thing that hung above their town. Fear, cold and razor-sharp, plunged into me. My legs, frozen for a horrible moment, screamed to run. I didn't understand what I was seeing, and every instinct screamed that I shouldn't. I tore my gaze away from the horrifying tableau, my heart hammering against my ribs, and stumbled back towards the inn. Each step was a desperate prayer. The whispers followed me, a dry, insidious sound that seemed to twine around my very thoughts. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I burst into my room, slamming the door shut and fumbling with the lock. I pressed myself against the wall, listening, heart still frantic. The whispers seemed to penetrate the thick walls. Fainter now, but still there, a chilling echo in the silent room. I huddled on the bed, pulled the covers over my head, and squeezed my eyes shut, wishing for the dawn to come. When morning finally broke, filtering through the drawn curtains, I felt like a creature emerging from a nightmare. The town was alive again. The whispers were gone. Martha was at the front desk, smiling pleasantly as I checked out. Owen had my car ready, the alternator seemingly replaced by magic. No one mentioned the night, the curfew, or the distorted figures. Their eyes were clear again, their movements normal. But I saw the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in Martha's hand as she handed me my change. I saw the way Owen's gaze lingered for a moment on the sky. I drove away from Oakhaven without looking in the rearview mirror. The image of those upturned, sightless eyes and the soft, collective hiss burned into my mind. I tell myself it was a hallucination, a stress-induced delirium from being stranded. But sometimes, when the streetlights outside my apartment flicker, and the world goes quiet at an unnatural hour, I can almost hear it again. That dry, rustling whisper, not quite a voice, but a sound of profound, ancient supplication. And I wonder, staring up at the empty sky, what they were whispering to. And if it only listens in the dark,